Good evening and welcome to the September meeting of the Salem Area Mass Transit Board. This evening's meeting will include a period for public comment, and then we have our consent calendar, which includes general things like minutes of previous meetings and a special report that has been sent to us. And then we have 5 action items this evening. One is to accept the annual fiscal year 2018 security report. Second item is to appoint members to unexpired terms of the STIF Advisory Committee. And then we will have a resolution to adopt the Transit Asset Management Policy. And then another resolution to adopt the State Transportation Improvement Fund Advisory Committee bylaws. And a final action item, which will be to discuss our general manager's performance and compensation. And then we will have a fiscal year 2018 performance report, and then the general manager's report and various reports from our directors. And with that, I will call the meeting to order and ask Director Lincoln to lead us in the pledge to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Linda, would you note that all the directors are present, so we have a quorum? And now I'll call on our general manager for our safety moment.
Thank you. In recognition of this Saturday being our bus rodeo day, and while it is a lot of fun and there's a lot of driver competition, bus rodeos were formed as a safety event that promotes safe driving, and all the obstacles are designed to acknowledge and recognize safety. So our safety moment today is to remind the board that our bus rodeo is Saturday, and if you have a little bit of time, please stop by and watch the action. It'll be a lot of fun.
Thank you. Are there any announcements or changes to the agenda? If not, we'll move on to public comment. Has anyone signed up for public comment? Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to comment? If not, we will move on to our consent calendar. Do we have a motion?
Move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And we are now moving into our action items. And so the first item, which is to accept the annual fiscal year 2018 security report. We'll call on our general manager to introduce.
Thanks. I'd ask Karen Garcia, our Security and Emergency Management Manager, to present the report.
Good evening, Director Krebs and members of the board. My name is Karen Garcia. I'm the Security and Emergency Management Manager, and this evening I'll be presenting the fiscal year 18 annual security report. So the issue is, shall the board accept the fiscal year 2018 annual security report? The district is committed to providing a safe and secure environment for all of our customers, employees, and members of the public, and to help ensure a comfortable and convenient ride for those who use the service. We regulate conduct on board our buses and at our transit centers. The intent of this report is just to share the statistical information that's been gathered over the year related to our key performance indicators, which include customer service contacts, security ride-alongs, exclusions from service, ordinance warnings, security incident reports, and law enforcement activity. So as most of you probably know, we have a multi-agency security team. This year I have 4 different entities represented on the team board. The reason for that is because, of course, we have Cherriots and we have our partnership with the Salem Police Department. But during the year, we had 2 different security providers. During the first half of the fiscal year, from July of 2017 through December of 2017, we were contracted with G4S Secure Solutions. That contract ended, and through our procurement process, we contracted with Allied Universal Security Services, who's been our security provider since January of 2018. The security team is responsible for providing information to our customers, responding to safety and security concerns, analyzing our security statistics to enhance public safety, ensuring a strong presence on our property and on our buses to deter unwanted behavior. We develop policies and procedures to ensure the safety and security of our personnel and facilities. We enforce regulations and district ordinances, and we maintain a safe environment for all of our stakeholders. The first piece of data that I'd like to share this evening is our customer service contacts. And just as a refresher on these slides, on the left-hand side of the slide is the Downtown Transit Center, and on the right-hand side is the Kaiser Transit Center. Fiscal year 17 by quarter is listed in the blue, and fiscal year 18 is listed in the red. So our customer service contacts include any contact where we assist a customer, whether that be where's the closest Bank of America or what route do I take to South Salem Commercial. So it's anything that we do to assist people that are on our property and using our service. Security bus rides are especially important to me because it's important to have a security presence at the transit centers, but it's also important for our customers and our staff to know that we're out in the system on board those buses. So this slide shows the number of rides per quarter. In the summer quarter, the numbers were pretty low, and that was due to a number of staffing turnovers with our previous contractor, G4S. We don't like to keep a not fully trained staff or one that's not been on the property very long at the transit center by themselves. So when we have new staff, we typically see a decrease in security bus rides for that reason. But as you can see, by the end of the year in the spring quarter, our numbers were up well above last year during that same quarter. So we've got a real presence out there in the system. The next slide shows the exclusions from our service and the written warnings that were issued. On the left side is the exclusions issued. On the right is the written warnings. So our ordinance allows for us to issue exclusions from the service to anyone who violates the ordinance. We tend to use a progressive discipline type of process where we do verbal warnings, and then if the person does not comply, the next time the violation occurs, we'll do a written warning, and then if we still can't gain compliance, we'll issue an exclusion. Now, for more severe incidences or law violations, we will go straight to an exclusion, but for minor incidences like bike riding or smoking where prohibited, we typically use that verbal, then written, then exclusion process. And to speak about ordinance warnings, this graph reflects the ordinance warnings that were issued by our security staff. So ordinance warnings to me are like public education. Not everyone knows our ordinance in and out, and not everyone is familiar with our property or the rules of expectations of behavior. So we use our ordinance warnings as a way to educate the members of the public about the behavior expectations here on the property and on board the buses. We need their compliance for safety for everyone that's using the surface, so that there's not an inconvenience to anyone. This is a breakdown of our verbal warnings, and on slides that are represented in this fashion, the different colors in each row represent the quarters. So the yellow is the spring quarter, the orangish red is the fall quarter, then blue is winter, and green represents the spring. So this is a breakdown of those verbal warnings during the fiscal year, and as you can see, smoking where prohibited was our #1 warning that was issued, which is pretty typical. Bicycling is another one that's pretty high from year to year. That second category there, the other category, I've realized over the last couple years there are a number of different violations that are lumped into the other category, and so that category was very large and hard to define. So in the middle of the fiscal year, I decided to break it up to see what was really going on, to help us better understand what that other category meant. So starting in January, these 3 items, audible devices without earphones, private vehicles driving through the bus lanes, and inappropriate language being used by customers on the property, those items were broken out from the other. So those 3 items are included during the first 2 quarters, but not during the second 2 quarters. And there's a picture showing a couple of our security staff interacting with one of our riders. So the next slide shows our private security incident reports. Anytime there's an unusual activity or event on our property or on our buses, a staff member is required to submit an incident report. So if it happens on board a bus out in the system, that might be the operator who submits the report. The numbers on this slide just reflect the incidents that our security staff submit and that do not involve police activity. So these are just actions that they take for incidences that happen primarily at the transit centers. And as you can see, the numbers at the downtown transit center are much higher than the ones at Kaiser just because of the numbers of people that we serve. This is a breakdown of the different types of incidences that our security staff have addressed over the year. And to take a look at the most common incidences, I broke that out in the slide. So the top 3 types of incidences last year in fiscal year 17 were medical emergencies, graffiti, and loitering. This year they were pretty close to the same. Again, graffiti and vandalism were right up there at the top. Medical emergencies were high on the list. And this year, disorderly conduct was our 3rd. Now I'd like to talk about our police partners. We track any requests that we make for a police response to the transit center, and this graph reflects the number of requests for a response made by myself or our security officers, our private security officers. Most of these numbers are, of course, Salem Police Department, but there are a few here from Kaiser where we've asked Kaiser Police Department to respond as well. For police activity, this is a breakdown by quarter of the different types of incidences that we have requested a police response for. And as usual, one of the top items is events that are not even related to Cherriots at all. So to look at the top items for this year, the top 4 types of activities during the previous fiscal year, during fiscal year 17, were the same 4. Non-Cherriots related incidences, trespassing incidences, which is when someone has been excluded from the property and then come back to the property or refuse to leave after receiving that notice. Vandalism was up there in the top 4, and this is mostly shelter glass that's broken out into the system, not so much here at the transit center. Normally vandalism incidences the security staff will address here at the transit center, but out in the system we report those incidences of criminal mischief to the police department and file a report. And then lastly, disorderly conduct. So the disorderly conduct numbers were down quite a bit from last year, from 40 in 2017 down to 27 this year. I always like to highlight disorderly conduct because that's something that brings alarm to people. Normally our disorderly conduct events are verbal arguments or disagreements where people get excited and there's kind of a disturbance because people hear yelling, but there's normally not any physical contact made. In fiscal year 17, we actually had 57 incidences, where in this past year, fiscal year 18, we only had 48. And these numbers reflect the private security incident reports involving disorderly conduct, as well as the police response incident reports. So it's all disorderlies lumped together. During this past year, we did have 10 incidences that I'm going to call assaults, but I'll define what assault means to me, and that means any kind of physical contact. So that could mean a push, someone spitting on another person, or an actual fist fight. That's possible to have happen as well. So out of those 10, we have 5 incidences that were between private citizens that didn't involve us at all. They just happened on our property. Then out of the other 5, we had 1 that involved a security officer being assaulted. We had 2 that police officers were involved in, and then we had 2 involving transit operators. 1 where an operator was pushed, another where an operator was spit on by a passenger. So as far as continuous improvement, what we're planning on continuing to work on in this coming fiscal year, We want to continue to work on our customer education campaign to help increase awareness of the behavior expectations on our property and help people use the system more efficiently. Cherriots will test our continuity of operations plan, which we've been working on developing for the last year. In November, we're going to actually do a tabletop exercise and exercise that plan and see its effectiveness so that we can continue to work on it and improve it. Staff are currently defining the needs related to an incident reporting software. The goal of this piece of software is to help us better track our security statistics and our incidences so that we can better utilize our staff resources in areas where they're most needed in the system. We also have a project for a visitor call system out at the Dell Web Operations Center to improve the safety and security of the staff and the facility when we have visitors on the property. We also are going to continue to update policies and procedures for our staff so that we make sure that our policies are relevant and incorporate security tools for our forward-facing staff, and this would mean our customer service staff and our reception staff up on the 5th floor. Give them tools to use to call for assistance if they have an emergency. So are there any questions at this time about the security report?
Thank you. Yes, Director Lincoln.
Couple of, well, question and a comment. One, how do you define loitering at the point that you give someone a warning?
The word loitering is not actually used in the ordinance. It refers to things like you must be on the property to either use the service or await someone's arrival that is using the service. It also says that you must use the next bus to your destination. Typically, all of our fixed route buses are here at least once an hour, so if someone's on the property for over an hour, we will approach that person and start to ask questions about why they're here, what route are they waiting for, can we help assist them in getting to the service that they need. Sometimes a person shows up at 11 a.m. and they're here for a regional bus, which doesn't come back until 3 or 4 in the afternoon. But typically, we will make the approach if we notice that someone's been on the property for an hour or longer.
And the property that you're talking about is just like waiting for the bus waiting area, not the area on the east side or the west side of the transit center where the benches are and the...
It would be the transit center and our customer service lobby. The Hatfield Plaza falls under a different set of rules,
Okay.
and the same language is not in that ordinance, so we don't really enforce loitering there because there's no rule against being there as long as you're not
Right.
violating any other rules.
Right. The other question I have is, it looks like, except for the security company's report, all of the incidences are down for 2018. And do you have what's your explanation? I mean, that's great. But
You know, I think part of it is presence. When this new company came on board, we had a lot of discussion about presence on the transit center. And in the security world, being out there and being available, that's a huge deterrent. And you can make a lot of headway by being out and visible to the customers. The other thing is, you know, we have the same violators, pretty common on a regular basis. So as long as they know that they're going to be held accountable and they're not going to be able to get away with violating the rules without us making contact with them, over time, we've seen a change in that behavior because they know that they risk being excluded from the service if they continue.
it's a very person-to-person type of...
Yes. Fortunately, our system is small enough where we know most of our regular riders, which is a good thing.
Thanks.
Yes, Director Bush.
I was just wondering if any of the disaster planning, I think you mentioned it in your report. I'd like to know what the status of that is or a process.
For now, we're trying to finish up the continuity of operations plan. We had a contract with Bold Planning, which was a 7-phase contract. We've completed 5 of those phases. The last 2 phases include the tabletop exercise that I mentioned in my report, and then we'll wrap up and go into continuous maintenance mode, if you will, for that contract. So once we get the continuity of operations plan completed, then we'll decide what the next step is that's appropriate for us to take for disaster planning. But there's plenty of work to be done in that area, so I don't think we'll have a lack of projects.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Are we ready for a motion?
I'll move the board accept the fiscal year 2018 annual security report as presented.
Second?
Moved and second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And our next item is to appoint members to the unexpired terms on the Special Transportation Fund Advisory Committee. And I'll call on our general manager to introduce that subject.
And this staff report will be presented by the Vice Chair of the STF Committee, John Hamill.
All right. Good evening, President Krebs and board members. This ought not to take long. The situation is amply described in the packet that was prepared for the board members and distributed earlier. And the things that are most relevant are that, as General Manager Pollock stated, we have a couple of positions that are unfilled and their terms are unexpired. We, as a committee, and you as a board and staff as a whole, have been soliciting people to apply for the Special Transportation Fund Advisory Committee, and we came up with 2 very good applicants, and the committee has recommended that they be appointed. The 2 applicants are particularly valuable because they fill some constituencies that are currently underrepresented on the committee. Is Mr. Baird here? He was not here. Okay. I'll start with Mr. Baird because he's a little simpler. Mr. Baird is a longtime user of our Cherriots service. He worked for the State Department of Environmental Quality and commuted by Cherriots, and now that he's retired, he continues to use Cherriots regularly. The thing that makes him particularly attractive is that he is enviably hale. The committee as a whole has many seniors who are disabled, but few who are able-bodied, and it's good to have Mr. Baird as a candidate because disabled people are a lot more cautious in the choices that they make. Also, all our disabled members are using things like the Cherriots Regional or Cherriots Lift and occasionally Chariot Shopper, but Cherriots itself is a kind of a backup option for most of our members, whereas for Mr. Baird, it's his mainstay. So he will provide an interesting and valuable addition to the group. The other applicant is Beth Jackson, who is here this evening, and she fulfills 2 of the membership categories that we are also short on. One is that she is not a baby boomer, so she will represent an outlook not of the people who are on their way out, but of the people who are on the way in, which is something that any ongoing committee needs to have. The other thing that she offers is that she will be one of the few people who, while not either disabled or a senior, she represents seniors and disabled. She is the transportation manager for Northwest Senior and Disability Services. And as such, she and the people who work for her take calls every day from many disabled and senior people trying to get their transportation needs solved in both Marion and Polk counties, and actually that organization has additional service areas outside Marion and Polk, but certainly lots here in Marion and Polk counties. So she will provide both a new perspective on her own and represent a broad spectrum of seniors and disabled in a way that few of the other members of the current committee are able to. And that concludes my report. The committee recommends that the board appoint these 2 to finish off the unfulfilled vacancies, and they will then be eligible for additional terms in years to come. If you've got any questions for me or for Ms. Jackson.
Any questions? Ms. Jackson, would you like to comment? You don't have to, but we're glad you're here and willing to serve.
You need to come up.
You can come up and use the microphone.
Yeah, a piece of clarification. I am an Aging and Disability Resource Connection and Transition Manager, which is different than Transportation Manager, which I thought would be important to share. The Aging and Disability Resource Connection is the entryway to programs and services for seniors and people with disabilities, but we also work to connect any caller to any resource that they might need in the community. We get about 1,500 calls a month, and so we screen them to see if they may need our services or something else out in the community. And I've been overseeing that team for 6 years, so I know a lot about them. We get a lot of calls about transportation, so we're connecting regularly, and we hear when a service might be lacking, and that's really why I wanted to get involved with this. Is I can pull reports and tell you the demographics and the different needs that are coming in and share that to be helpful.
Thank you.
Questions?
Any questions?
Thank you. The reason you need to come up is because we're on CCTV, and so your comments need to be able to be recorded, so.
And thank you for your willingness to serve. Do we have a motion?
I'll do that.
Director Bush?
I move that the board declare position 2 vacant that was held by Sharon Hewer and appoint Beth Jackson to fill the unexpired term from October 1, 2018 and ending December 31, 2019. Moreover, that Bryant Baird be appointed to fill the unexpired term of position 9 from October 1 to 2018 to December 31, 2018 of the Special Transportation Fund Advisory Committee.
Second.
Moved and second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, and the motion carries. So we'll go on to the next item, which is Resolution 2018-07, adoption of the Transit Asset Management Policy 119.
Thanks. I'll ask David Trimble, Chief Operating Officer, to please come forward.
Good evening, President Krebs and board members. The discussion tonight is regarding the adoption of Resolution 2018-07 to establish a Transit Asset Management, or TAM, policy and the accompanying TAM plan. So, first of all, in your board packets, you have a copy of the policy, which was reviewed at your previous board work session on September 10th. And I do have to say it's my apologies for you all receiving the draft plan, as our consultant had a few hiccups. They're going through a merger and acquisition, and there were lots of excuses. But notwithstanding the excuses, got the draft plan to me late while I was attending the APTA conference. So understanding that we will make edits. To their credit, they actually did send out an updated plan with some of the mistakes that were already taken care of, which was waiting for me when I arrived today. So that was very good to see. So those submissions will need to be made to the FTA by October 1st. So for a little bit of background and context, as part of the federal requirements for the Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century, or MAP as it was called, transit agencies are required to have a transit asset management plan in place by October 1st, 2018. So in short, the main push behind the TAM requirement is for the Federal Transit Administration to have confidence that transit agencies have adequate processes in place for planning resources and to replace federally funded assets. So moreover, transit agencies will be required to report to the National Transit Database going forward on an annual basis, and these plans will be evaluated during the triennial process every 3 years. So transit asset management is a business model, that monitors conditions of assets in order to keep transit networks in what's called a state of good repair. It needs to be said, however, that irrespective of the TAM process, Cherriots has always had systems in place to manage its capital assets, and we've made those systems more robust, quite frankly, over the past 2 years. Now, an asset is considered in a state of good repair when it meets 3 criterion. First of all, it is able to perform its desired function. Number 2, it does not pose a known unacceptable safety risk. And number 3, its useful life benchmark has not been met. Cherriots is considered a Tier 2 asset reporting agency. A Tier 2 agency means that the agency operates less than 101 vehicles across all fixed route models, or less than 101 vehicles in a non-fixed route or a paratransit or dial-a-ride model. And so we're considered a Tier 2. So for the purposes of the Tier 2 plan, agencies fall into 3 asset categories. Rolling stock, which are all of our revenue vehicles. Equipment, all non-revenue and maintenance vehicles. And facilities, all support and passenger facilities like transit centers or maintenance operations buildings. Our capital asset list contains 124 revenue vehicles, 16 non-revenue vehicles, and 4 Cherriots-owned facilities, which include the Del Webb Operations Building, the Del Webb Maintenance Building, the Downtown Transit Center, and the Kaiser Transit Center. So a Tier 2 plan must include the following elements. Number 1 is an inventory of all capital assets, which we've always maintained. Number 2 is a condition assessment of capital assets. Now again, the Cherriots Maintenance and Facilities team have always done an outstanding job with detailing the conditions of our rolling stock and our vehicle equipment. However, this year, Cherriots utilized a third-party engineering company, EMG as it's called, to come in and work with our maintenance and facilities folks to evaluate all of our facilities and the components in those facilities and assign what's called a Transit Economic Requirements Model, or TERM, condition rating. EMG spent 5 days here with us, crawling through narrow spaces, climbing ladders, going on rooftops, digging things, they were all over the place, in order to complete a complete assessment on all of our facilities components, like the HVAC systems, rooftops, walls, sealants around windows, flooring, just to name a few. So I am pleased to say that after that assessment, all of our facilities and assets are maintained in a state of good repair. And we were actually rated better than our target of no facilities being rated below a 3 on the FTA's Economics Requirements Model, or TERM scale, as I mentioned before. In fact, many of our facilities rated a 4 on the TERM scale. Now, the TERM scale is a scale from 1 to 5. It's a 1 to 5 condition rating, whereby 5 is given when the asset is considered new or like new condition. A 4 is given when the asset is in good condition but no longer new. A 3 is given when the asset has moderate deterioration but has not exceeded its useful life. A 2 rating means that the asset is defective and is actually in need of replacement immediately, and the useful life has been exceeded. A number 1 rating means that the asset is critically damaged or in need of immediate repair. And as I said before, we've rated a 4 or 3 above it in all of our assets, so that's really good. The next element is a decision-making tool and process, and that is completed through our capital planning process, specifically through the Capital Program Committee, where all of our capital needs are reviewed and planned on an annual basis and reviewed and reported on quarterly. The Capital Program Committee is chaired by the Chief Operating Officer, the Vice Chair is the Chief Financial Officer, and the rest is comprised of the rest of the executive team. Also included are the Contracts and Procurement Manager, the Grant Analyst, and the Operations Programs Administrator. The last element is the investment prioritization, and that is set by the Capital Program Committee with ultimate authority by the General Manager to sign off on our priorities. So just a reminder again for context, the TAM policy represents the why of what we do regarding asset management, and the TAM plan represents the operational and technical processes for what and how we manage assets. So attached in your packet is a copy of the asset management policy, and I'd like to review just a few of the highlights. So I think it's page 37 in your packets. So I just want to read for the audience the purpose of the Transit Asset Management Policy. And 119.01, in keeping with Salem-Area Mass Transit District's mission of connecting people with places through safe, friendly, and reliable public transportation services, this policy serves to do the following. Number 1, communicate the board's commitment to the SAMTD team and to the Salem-Kaiser communities that SAMTD serves including the surrounding rural communities, to maintain the district's assets in a state of good repair. Number 2, express the board's intention to foster a culture of continuous improvement in asset management, planning, and performance. Number 3, be made accessible to all board members, to internal staff, to external stakeholders, and members of the public. The number 4 purpose is to outline the district's overall asset management approach in a manner consistent with federal regulations. You can read the regulation, as set by management strategies and plans that are achievable with available funds. And number 5 is to comply with the Federal Transit Administration's TAM management requirements and the final ruling on July 26, 2016. I'm going to move to section 119.03 because I think it's important just to tell what SAMTD's policy commitment is. And number 1, the first commitment is to ensure that the allocation of resources necessary to reach its transit management targets. Number 2 is financial stewardship, transparency, and collaboration with our funding partners. Promoting a culture that supports optimal asset management across the organization. Number 4, focusing on high-quality, data-driven decisions to make safe, reliable, sustainable service for the communities which we serve. Number 5 is supporting the timely implementation of projects and programs to maintain our assets in a state of good repair over their entire life. And lastly, continually improving its asset management strategies and plans, including setting goals, objectives, and measures to monitor and improve performance. Next are the plan elements, 4 of which I've already talked about. So the FTA regulation defines, again, SAMTD as a Tier 2 agency, and as such, requires SAMTD to implement a TAM plan that includes 4 of 9 elements. So we have actually gone above that and beyond those minimum requirements and developed the 5 additional elements of TAM, and we'll talk about those now. On page 39 in your packets, I've already talked about the first 4, the asset inventory of assets, condition assessments, the decision support tool, and the prioritized list of investments. But in order to be more transparent, we've developed a transit asset management state of good repair policy, which is before you today. We've also included the implementation strategy, key annual activities, the identification of resources, and evaluation of the plan. And all that is included and outlined in the district's robust capital planning process. With regard to the board authority, the board of directors shall review the TAM policy every 3 years, and the board has the authority to approve and amend the SAMTD TAM policy. The district's authority lies with the general manager or designee, who will have overall responsibility for overseeing the development of asset management plans and procedures in cooperation with the team, and reporting to the board on the status of the asset management of Cherriots. In accordance with this policy, implementation of the TAM plan will be a shared responsibility for all departments as directed by the general manager. So in closing, staff recommends that the board adopt Resolution 208-07 to establish the Transit Asset Management, or TAM, policy number 119, and the Transit Asset Management Plan, which outlines the district's strategies to ensure that all of its rolling stock, equipment, and facilities are maintained in a consistent state of good repair. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Do we have any questions? No question? I have one. We have been doing a very good job of running our buses beyond the prescribed lifespan. Does that lower our rating if we keep those buses in a state of good repair?
No, it doesn't lower your rating. What you have to do on an annual basis is to demonstrate how you're maintaining the vehicles, and we maintain them with our great maintenance team very well. So no, it's actually a good thing when we can stretch the federal dollars and maintain vehicles, as long as the operating cost for maintenance doesn't start to become a problem. It's actually looked upon very, very, very well from the FTA when you can stretch those resources.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Director Lincoln.
This is a minor detail, I think, but in the memo, it talks about the capital assets that the district has in 4 Cherriot-owned facilities, the 4 transit centers, but it doesn't mention bus stops. And are those, I would assume, are passenger facilities?
So the FTA defines what those facilities are going to be, and they're defined as passenger facilities. So bus stops are not included in this part. What would be included are if we had park and rides, like structured park and rides, like a 4-tiered or 4 structured park and rides, but bus stops in and of themselves are not included in this.
Oh, really? So, okay. So we're on our own as far as keeping those in good repair then?
Well, that's just the right thing to do, so we try to do the best job we can.
Okay.
By the way, I think this is an amazing document. It's got a lot of information in it, and I hope there'll be a link to it maybe on our website for future reference.
Yeah, we'll make it a reference document for sure.
Great, thank you.
It's quite large, and we're going to be adding about 250 more pages of appendices, so.
And you really only need to read the first 30 pages because the rest of it is all support materials in the appendix and so forth. Yes, Director Bush.
Well, and in saying all that, that's a lot of details to coordinate, so your team is the whole district. I just want to give kudos to everybody for all the work they put into that, because you've been working on it for a long time, on top of having the triennial review happening at the same time, and we're planning for changes with Hospital 2017. So, well done.
Thank you, Director Bush.
Yes, Director Evans.
I'm good.
Oh, okay.
Waiting to do a motion.
Okay, Director Evans.
Everybody okay? I move the board adopt Resolution 2018-07 to establish the Transit Assessment Management TAM Policy 119 and the Transit Assessment Management Plan, which outlines the district's strategies to ensure that all of its rolling stock, equipment, and facilities are maintained in a consistent state of good repair.
Second.
Moved in second. Any comments? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, and the motion carries. Thank you. And thank you. The next item is Resolution 2018-08, adoption of the State Transportation Improvement Fund Advisory Committee bylaws. I'll call on our general manager.
And I will present this report. So as you're aware, as a result of House Bill 2017, Salem Marion Mass Transit District becomes the qualified entity for Marion and Polk counties. As part of the statutory requirements of a qualified entity, you are required to establish an advisory committee to assist you in that process and ultimately make a recommendation to this body for projects for each biennium. At previous work sessions, we have presented draft versions of the bylaws, and they've been modified along the way, and I'll go over a couple of those in a minute. At the August 29th Advisory Committee meeting, the committee did review the revised bylaws and unanimously passed a motion to recommend approval by this body of the bylaws. The bylaws ultimately become Attachment C to your board bylaws, where the other attachments are the other committee bylaws. So in case you're wondering, what are Attachment A and B? So in your packet is a copy of the revised bylaws, a couple of highlights that have changed since the last time. So we've cleaned up the definitions page, specifically the definition of high percentage of low-income households. I got a feeling over time this is going to change because the guidance that the state gave is pretty difficult to understand. And I think as other agencies come up with theirs and we actually work it through a cycle of applications, I think there'll be some cleanup in that in the next legislative session. Also on page 48, Article 2, Section 1, we cleaned up the language to change the composition of the membership to no less than 7 members and no more than 11 members. The earlier version you saw was no less than 7, no more than 9 members. But as we developed getting people on that committee, it seemed we needed more and more people to represent the appropriate constituents that were important to you. So These bylaws will allow us to go up to 11 members. And then we cleaned up some just basic grammatical items, but those were the two main pieces. And the advisory committee is recommending that you adopt Resolution 2018-08, which would establish the attachment C to your bylaws, and that attachment would be titled Bylaws Governing Proceedings and Conduct of the Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund Advisory Committee.
Yes, Director Kelly.
I have a question under appointment and membership.
What page is it? Is that
On
46?
page 48. And that's that the board, now, are we not the board?
Yes.
Will include STIF members from both within and outside the district boundaries to the extent practicable, and I think that may be, I do not understand that because our board composition is determined by our state law with our subdistricts.
No, but the STIF members, what that's saying is that the board will appoint members that are within the district boundaries and without, so because
Okay, so
it's the.
actually, it maybe would be better served to say the board will appoint rather than include.
That's
Because
That's fine, we can
when
change
you
it.
read this, it says that our board would include, not that our board would appoint.
Okay,
It almost sounds like, you could interpret that as the board will include members from this
Yeah,
committee.
that's what I was trying to say.
no, that's a good, it's a good cleanup. Yes.
Okay. Do we need
And
a
I'm really sorry, I've been out of town, so it,
so we change include to appoint?
So when we make a motion, we say as
As.
changed,
As revised.
that's
revised.
Are you ready to make that motion?
Sure.
Okay, do we have any more discussion before the motion?
Comments?
Okay, Director Bush?
Let's see if I can do this. Where's it at?
Page 42.
I move that the board adopt Resolution 2018-08, establishing attachment C titled Bylaws Governing Proceedings and Conduct of the Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund Advisory Committee as amended.
Second.
You can second.
Okay, it's been moved to second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion opposed, same sign. Regardless of whether it's unanimous, you do have to ask for the
Yeah.
negative vote. Otherwise, now we have the next and last agenda item is discussion of the general manager's performance evaluation and compensation. So I think in our executive session, we went over his performance evaluation, and he was rated satisfactory or better in all categories, probably came out with a much better than satisfactory. There were no negative, there were some suggestions of things to do, but no negative marks on the agenda, on his evaluation. So and we also talked about discussion. Is there any, about his compensation, is there any additional discussion that you want to carry on at this time about that? Then I will call on Director Kelly for a motion.
I move that we provide
Oh,
General Manager Alan Potluck with a $5,000 bonus. This would be in addition to the 3% annual cost of living that he received in July.
Second.
moved and second. And is there any discussion? Do you want to talk before or after the motion?
No, after.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, and the motion carries. And Alan would like to say a few words.
Yes, thank you. Now that the vote is in. I just want to say thank you for the evaluation. I take those very seriously. I appreciate the comments that were positive, and I also appreciate we'll call them constructive criticism to make me better, because that's the whole purpose of this. And so I'll be doing some individual follow-ups on a couple of those comments to make sure I'm understanding those. But thank you for the evaluation and the compensation adjustment. It's very appreciated.
Thank you. I think, speaking for the board, we appreciate the job you're doing in running the agency. And now it's your turn to give your report for the month.
No, don't we have the annual?
Oh, no, we have the
report?
performance.
Huh? Oh, excuse me, jumped ahead one.
He sat here all night waiting for this.
It'd be okay with Chris.
Hey,
See you next month.
You sat here for the whole thing.
Good evening, President Krebs, members of the board. I'm here this evening to present on FY18 Annual Performance Report. This covers the months of July 2017 through June of 2018. First, we'll take a look at our services overview comparing FY17 to FY18. We'll look at our local service first. As you can see, we have a decrease in revenue hours and revenue miles, but a real positive note. We see the first increase in ridership year over year since the change with moving forward. So this is really exciting to see increase in boardings on our local system. Next, we'll take a look at the Cherriots regional system. These show a negative revenue hours, revenue miles, and boardings. We had a significant change from 17 to 18, and that was the removal of the 2X service to Grand Ronde, which contributes to most of this decrease in comparison. Cherriots Shop and Ride, we see an increase in revenue hours, revenue miles, and boardings. This is a demand response service, and we've seen a slight increase in numbers on this service. Next, we'll look at the Cherriots Lift, sorry, missed on that old name there. We've seen an increase in revenue hours and revenue miles. Boardings per day are down. This has been a consistent trend over the last few years since we established the eligibility qualification for this service. Over the last few quarters, we've discussed with you guys the increase in revenue hours and revenue miles being for the contract, new contract, to provide better on-time performance. There was a standard put into the contract that required that, and so we've seen an increase in revenue hours and miles over the last few quarters to address on-time performance for this service. Next, we're going to take a route snapshot for FY18. We take this snapshot, we did it last year, looking at the month of April, and this kind of looks at the routes at just a point in time. If you look at it through the year, there's variations all through, and so just kind of taking a look at what they look like on a 1 month basis, year over year. So with this, we look at ridership average daily boardings, and we see that the Route 11 has the largest number of boardings per day, and the 26 and 27 in West Salem, which are new routes that we implemented in this year, have lower ridership, our coverage routes, but we hope to see those increase over time. Next, we have the average daily boardings for the regional routes. Route 40X is the top performer in this category, followed by the Route 1X. The Route 50X is the lowest number, but each one of these services have different trip levels, the number of trips, and the 50X is the lowest, has the fewest trips out of all of them, which would also indicate lower average daily boardings. Next, we'll look at boardings per revenue hour on our corridor routes. Our corridor routes, we have a target of 20 boardings per revenue hour, and the majority of our system is performing at the 20 boardings or above. We have a few that are below that. The Route 13 over the last year has had some significant increases and being the top performer with over 25 boardings per revenue hour. Our neighborhood shuttles are kind of connector service coverage routes. The Route 7 is our top performer in this category, with the Route 22 being the lowest. And our target boarding for these routes is 10 boardings per hour. With our regional express service, the 1X is our highest performer for boardings per revenue hour, with the 20X that serves Silverton, Mount Angel, and Woodburn being our lowest performer in this area, and it also has a target boarding of 10 boardings per revenue hour. Currently, with the technology that we have, we're not able to do a stop-by-stop on-time analysis. That's coming in the future with better technology on our buses. We currently take a snapshot or evaluate looking at arrival times at the downtown transit center to look at end-of-line on-time performance. We have a target goal of 85% for on-time performance for the overall day. The local system is performing at 90% on time overall, and the regional system was performing during this time at 81%. Looking at the overall routes for our local routes, at the 85%, most all of our routes are performing at or above that 85%. We have two routes, the Route 2 and the Route 8, that are not meeting that standard at this point in time. We also look at the peak time periods, and we have a standard of 75 because you would during that peak period, you would expect buses to have more struggles getting into town. And so we wanted to look at both of those. We have a few more routes that are not meeting that standard, but we've made some changes already since April that will address some of those. Some of those changes are changes that were just made in September with route changes on the 13 that shortened that route, which the Route 13 is interlined with the 22, so improving the 13's on-time performance should in turn improve the 22. The Route 7 and the Route 7 had modifications to it as well, and so we should expect to see better performance out of that route. Route 2 and 8, that overall performance time is low because they're really struggling during that peak time. We conducted a camera review to collect more data throughout the route to see if we could make some time point adjustments to help with that. We believe that we found some areas that we can help with the Route 2, and we plan to make those schedule adjustments in January. The Route 8, we weren't able to collect that data prior to the end of school last year, and we like to have it during the school year. And the reason we actually decided not to do it because that route was in the middle of a construction zone on 12th Street, so collecting that data would have been irrelevant and not actual data that we could use to make decisions about the overall route. For our regional routes, we have two that were currently in this snapshot not meeting our on-time performance, and we have the 85% on-time performance for these routes as well. We were aware of this prior to this snapshot, and so we had been doing work looking at the Route 10X and 20X, and we actually made schedule adjustments in May of this last year, and we did some subsequent checks on this route after April just to see if those changes had improved that, and they were performing at above or at our standard. During the peak period, we also looked at them. During the peak period, all of them were meeting our standard or exceeding it, except for the Route 20. And all of our samples on the Route 20 during the peak period showed that it was not making, it was running late on all of those trips. And that has been addressed with the changes that we made in May. So it looks much better now than it did in this snapshot. And with that, that concludes my report. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Any questions? Yes, Director Rob?
It's probably more of a comment or just a thought. I'm glad you're working on Route 2 because that goes right by my house and I depend on it. And anyway, the last couple of weeks I've had a lot of opportunity to just hop on the bus and go somewhere and just follow my nose, get off and get back on and kind of see how things are going. And I've been able to speak with some of the drivers, and Route 11 driver was mentioning as we were going into the Kaiser transit station, he said, recently, I haven't been able to get here quite on time. He was concerned about it. He felt it was the extended service going out, past Kugler to the jail. And I see, it's third from the bottom here in on time, just above number 2. And so I thought, is there a connection there, or is it something else?
This would be a snapshot from April, which would not indicate that. We're currently in the middle of doing, we do a snapshot in September and October of on-time performance, and so we will be monitoring that. And with a service change, especially in the first couple weeks of a service change, it takes some time for things to iron out, but we are monitoring the changes that we made on the Route 11, and we'll continue to look at that as we go forward.
Yeah, I know you are. Yeah. There's no criticism here, just a concern by a driver who wants to do things the right way.
Oh yes, and I didn't take it that way. It's something that we definitely want to look at, and it's when we put a new route out there, extending it or changing the path that it takes. The routes that we changed in September, especially like the 7 and the 11, we're really focused on those because they were fairly significant changes to those routes. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the data is showing and seeing what we need to do if we need to do anything.
You're doing a good job.
Thank you.
Yeah. If they're running ahead of schedule, do they stop somewhere?
Yes.
And wait?
Yes, that would it would be marking time. So the time that we're looking at is the scheduled time that they're scheduled to arrive at the transit center to when they actually do. And we have a standard that we've developed in our service guidelines that says anything up to 5 minutes late is considered on time. Anything more than 5 minutes late arriving at the transit mall would be considered late.
Yeah,
And but on the route,
yeah.
Operators have to hold to those time points, those listed time points that are on our schedule.
Right.
They're required to maintain those, and if they're not, they're supposed to, and we have ops supervisors and operations staff that monitor that and make sure that that they are adhering to those.
Yeah. One of the issues is Lancaster and the traffic. You never know. You have no control over the slowdown, or it might be wide open in our schedule. One thing I've noticed is on Lancaster, just south of State Street, buses will pull over there and wait to catch up, their time catch-ups, and they're still in the roadway when they wait. So cars coming around State Street, turning onto Lancaster going south, have to go around them. And sometimes that means that cars are going into the median in the center because a car is trying to go around it.
So are we talking about southbound buses?
Southbound buses.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not a very safe place to wait for your time to catch up.
Yeah.
They should wait further south because of that intersection.
Well, that is a time point, so they cannot go any farther south. So they would have to mark time farther north of that point
Got
in
it.
order to.
Which could be an issue too.
Yeah, Lancaster Drive is
Yeah, that's a tough
is a
one.
balancing act that you have to kind of operators. A lot of our operators do very good at trying to manage their time and adjust their speed and looking
Sure.
at things. But there are going to be times where
Yeah.
things just don't go the way you expect them to.
I don't
go.
know how
And-
you deal with Lancaster because there's no good place probably. Yeah, but I've noticed that a couple times that bus is sitting there.
Is that recently or?
Oh, yeah.
Before, I mean, September?
Yeah, in September.
In September on, okay.
Mhm. Yeah. So,
We'll be looking at the 11's schedule that we put out there and monitoring it.
it's got to be the toughest one because of the traffic.
Yeah, and there's no bus pullouts.
Yeah.
They're all difficult. They all have their school zones
Yeah.
and stuff, but it's something that we continue to monitor. And as we get better tools with the technology coming on the bus, hopefully we'll be able to help with that more.
Great, thank you.
Well, it is understandable, though. You have to hold at the time point because that's the advertised time to leave that point. And if you leave sooner, then you're possibly leaving somebody that's expecting the bus to be there at that time. And that's reliability.
Yes.
Any other questions? Yes, Director Kelly.
It's not quite exactly a statement, but I'm just reiterating what Director Krebs said, because if someone gets to a stop at the appropriate time and the bus has already left, then it is very annoying, and, you know, and that's called running hot if you do that, and it's not an appropriate activity. So maybe, I don't know what you can do for the concern that Director Evans had, but potentially maybe looking at a little bit further south time point and something.
Or adjusting the time between the time points so that
Yeah.
the previous time point is at market. So during certain times of the day, we might need to decrease that. Although when you have 4 buses coming through that area in an hour,
yeah,
we average out those times looking at those routes so that, and you may have one that has lots of time and then you have one that has no time and is running late, and you try to pick somewhere in the middle
Right.
to balance that
Yeah.
out.
I've seen them a block away from each other.
And that's what you don't want, is to have 2 buses close together, because the first guy's doing all the work, because the second guy's running empty because
Yeah, bus bunching is something that we experience at times out in the system, and our operations team work to try to alleviate that, but with the tools, it's hard right now.
Yeah,
They're
it is.
more reacting instead of managing it and being proactive in making adjustments, which, as I've said, with the technology that's coming, we'll be able to do more of that, of managing those systems and helping keep that bus bunching from happening in
Yeah,
the
the
future.
West Salem Bridge is the same thing,
Yes.
yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you very much. We're not critical, we're just asking.
No, I
And we appreciate the
happy
good
that I
job
could come and
everybody's doing to
provide it.
keep the buses running pretty close to on time.
Thank you.
And now we'll call for our general manager's report.
Thank you. So I have a few items to report, some a little disappointing and some good news. So first, I guess we'll start with disappointing. So earlier this week, Secretary Chow did announce the awarding of grants for the bus and bus facilities for this year. As you recall, we submitted applications for paratransit buses in South Salem Transit Center. We were not a recipient. So there was $366.2 million in grants awarded. The state of Oregon received $1.7 million. The state, ODOT, actually received the only grant in the state of Oregon. It was a consolidated grant of some small agencies, So that 1.7 was divvied out in different amounts to Yamhill County, Benton County, Canby Area Transit, Curry County, Mid-Columbia Economic Development District to allow them to buy buses. So good for them, but it's interesting. And at the APTA conference this week, we heard from the FTA, and we never did get clear about their rules. We were never disqualified, but they did look if you received the bus and bus facilities previous year. It's going to be tougher because to be honest, it's oversubscribed, like for $10 for every $1 available. So if you got one year, it's going to be really tough the next year. But they didn't say you're automatically out. And then if you received a low-no grant, you might not get a bus and bus facilities or vice versa. So we're still trying to figure all that out. But the bottom line is we didn't receive grants this year. On the good news side, I think several of you know Julie Brown, the general manager at Rogue Valley Transit District. Earlier this week, she was confirmed by the state senate to be an Oregon Transportation Commission member, which is nice to have a true transit person on that commission. And so I think she goes on effective August 1st. I'm not sure the exact date, but congratulations go to her. And then I would just close saying that we did just get back last night from the APTA annual meeting, and so we'll give our reports next month. I think Bob will say the same thing in more detail, but the short version, it was a good meeting. I was elected to chair of the Small Operations Committee and was elected by the Board of Directors to serve on the APTA Executive Committee. So there goes another weekend of transit. And then I would just close by thanking those that were able to attend the ribbon cutting ceremony last week. That was a great event, and I'm sure a couple of you will talk about that. So I'll leave it there.
Well, I've had a busy month, and almost like I have a job this month, because I have on my timesheet here, I have 80 hours put in for various activities, but part of that includes the APTA convention, and that was the American Public Transit Association convention in Nashville. And again, we just got back last night, so I will give my report next month on that, but a lot of exciting things happened at that convention. It was one of the better ones that I've attended in a while. Some of the things that I did this month that were interesting, I attended the Association of Oregon Rail and Transit Advocates, and they have planned to hold their annual meeting in Salem. So we're bringing some dollars into the Salem community with the Transit Advocate Group. They also are supporting the Brooks intermodal station proposal. This is be a transfer station where trucks load onto rail cars so that they could avoid having to truck into Portland to transload, and it will create jobs here in Marion and Polk County for local residents. Also, I wrote a letter to support that project, a personal letter, because of my transportation background. And the advantage, one of the reasons I'm supporting it is because there's a push not only to add freight service, but to upgrade the railroad so we could have extension of the West commuter rail service down here to Salem, which would mean that you'd have several trains a day going from Salem to Beaverton, where you connect with TriMet into all of the metropolitan area. And that's something that's a possibility, probably won't happen for 10 years or more, but it's something that's interesting. I attended the bus ribbon cutting, and I have a story from that I'd like to share. I was talking to one of the attendees, a disabled person, and she thanked me for, and Cherriots, not me, I don't do much but sit here, but she thanked Cherriots for having the service they do, and she said she had to go to Portland for a meeting with one of her organizations, and so she told me how she did it. She took her local Cherriots bus down here to the transit center, then she caught our 1X to Beaverton, and then she transferred to the Smart 2X to the Barber Transit Station, And then she transferred to the Barber Boulevard TriMet bus and continued on with the transfer downtown, got to her destination. And the cost for that was, for a disabled person, is $550 round trip. But she said that because Cherriots has transit training, and she went through that program, she's able to comfortably, being a visually impaired person, make a trip like that with multiple transfers. And so this is just one of the reasons we need to have a good, stable transit system for people that need to get around. It gives them the freedom to do things that otherwise they'd be locked up having to stay home. But I thought that was an interesting thing. The second thing is that while we were away at Nashville, I saw that they had the 100-year dedication of the Salem Railroad Station. And I worked on that project 20 years ago, so I was sorry to miss the celebration, but it's a great facility, and it's come of age because now all of our inner city services go into that operation. Both Amtrak and all of the inner city bus lines go into that particular station. So that was the intent when we started that program, and it's a real jewel in the transportation crown of Salem. But those are the main things I had to talk about today. Next month I'll probably have a longer report because there's a lot of exciting things that happened at the APTA meeting. And I'm going to, looks like Director Rogers is ready.
Oh, yes, I'm always ready. Well, I had a health issue that kind of slowed me down somewhat, so I didn't get to everything this month. But got the regular board meeting and the work session. I only hit one neighborhood association, and I could squeeze it in with recovery and everything else that I'm doing. But I was able to spend quite a bit of time with a constituent one-on-one dealing with the bus stop issue that I have forwarded on, and we'll see if that can be resolved in some way that's satisfactory. And I was able to go to the bus ribbon cutting ceremony, and it was very nice. It was a beautiful day for it. Unfortunately, I couldn't have any of the cake that I wanted to dive into, but got some restrictions there for a while. Let's see, and oh yes, and I've been planning for, Swigel School is having an event. They did last year too, where 500 people came. A lot of organizations will have tables out there and share with the neighbors, what they can offer them. Last year I was there, represented transit, and had lots of contact with people. I'll be there again, and this is going to be tomorrow. We've got neighborhood associations, the fire trucks come out there and have their lights going, and it's really a fun, festive time. And we expect no less than 500 people again this time. And so that's something we're looking forward to, but I've been spending a lot of time putting, my table together, getting ready for tomorrow. And then I've been riding the buses. I've had time, so I get on the bus and off I go. And I'm learning more about how transit works just by getting on the bus and observing. And that's been my month.
Thank you. And we're glad you're back and recuperating.
Oh, yes.
Director Bush.
Welcome back, Doug. I've had a busy time. Part of it, we were having some house repairs going on, so scheduling that in has made life rather interesting in our house, and especially we have a cat that likes to be on top of everything. So, okay, here we go. I went to the Kaiser Revitalization meeting that combined the Kaiser City Council and a Citizens Advisory Committee and their Planning Commission. I think that's right. Anyway, how is Kaiser going to grow? Looking at the future. And we were included in that conversation, so that's been very interesting. I attended the the STIF meeting, the Special Transportation Fund, where they picked the members that we approved tonight. And it talked about the Highway 99 corridor, transit planning that we've been working on, and I got the minutes here. Some bus stop improvements, and some different comments were made about those who are visually impaired. They're having a hard time seeing the new signs, especially with the blue against blue sky in Oregon, which we sometimes have. We had a lot of that this summer. Very good discussion. I did arrive late, so I did have to ask for the minutes so I can give you a good report. So that's that. I attended the Kaiser Fire District's Patriot Day ceremony on 9/11. They can still continue to do that. They have a good speaker, and they'll have the taps and the Amazing Grace played by the, what are they called? Bagpipes. That's it. That's always very moving and helps us to remember those who gave all for us, and not necessarily by choice. So I attended the mayor's a monthly coffee with Kathy, and is usually a round table of conversation, discussing mostly some things about the homelessness initiative and how we can help in those scenarios. And that morning, I also was able to attend a coffee with Senator Winters, Salem City Council Lewis, and candidate for representatives, Miss Selma Pierce. Very enlightening conversation. So got some more background history to the 2017 work, and being on this end of it makes all of that work worthwhile. Their travel all around the state and all of the details we've had to go through just for our part. You can imagine what the rest of the state is doing. Attended our neighborhood associations where Kaiser Fire District is talking about their levy, the upcoming election. Different candidates are out there plugging their policies. I do want to say it was an honor to be at the bus ribbon cutting. That was to share the reveal of the hard work of all of our staff, federal, state, local, finance, customer service, you name it. We're all part of that. It was great. I have received a couple of great comments from nonprofits at the different luncheons in the community, and one was for Gilbert House. Kaiser Chamber hosted it was at Gilbert House this last time, and the director gave us a great big kudos for our play area in the facility, so that was fun. I didn't get to go up and get a picture taken. I'll have to do that later. One other comment was the travel training program and the Cherriots Trip Choice. Contact with Mid-Valley Literacy Center, and Melissa Kidd, who was here earlier, and I were talking about that. She says there's a regular time where we go to the travel training and offer that to the refugees who don't speak English, help to teach them how to use the bus, how to get around, and how important that is to their well-being here in our community. So that was great to hear. Good job, everybody. I'm done.
Well, I'm just recovering also. Well, my voice isn't recovered yet. Recovering also, so I haven't done a whole lot. I did the mandatory things, the work session and the board meeting, and then the ribbon cutting was the only optional thing that I did this last month. But look out next month. I'm ready to go.
Welcome back, Jerry.
Appreciate that. I found one thing I forgot to report on. I don't usually attend the Citizens Advisory Committee, but I did this last month, and it's a very active group, and they're giving us a lot of good advice on improvements that make the system easier to use by our constituents. But at that meeting, a couple things happened. They were given a couple presentations on service performance and a new educational program that the board will see next week at the work session. But they did plan to have an earlier meeting than usual, not on their scheduled time, so that they have to select a president or chair and vice chair for next year, and they want to do that before our December board meeting so that we can approve it as a board. And then one of the nice things was that we had a preview ahead of the ribbon cutting of the new bus, so they got to see the new bus first. And the next Citizens Advisory Committee meeting hasn't been scheduled yet, but it'll be held before our board meeting in December. And now I'll call on Director Evans.
Well, I was the one that was supposed to go to that, but I was celebrating my 18th anniversary in Las Vegas. So spent a couple hours at the State Fair at a booth for the archives, and I put my pin on, and people started engaging me on transit issues and interest and concern, and I shared the potential for the 2017 House bill. And then I continue my tours at the Capitol on Fridays. I went to the City Club and listened to the discussion of the political projections for the local and state offices and races. I met with a chairlift writer who called through Linda to get to me, and because I represent his area, and he had missed his Cherriots lift ride and was miffed about how far he would have to walk, and so I eliminated all his concerns. I went and picked him up and took him to his doctor's appointment, and he was happy. And then I continued to work on the Rotary volunteer projects that are out of the downtown and West Salem. And this last weekend I did the triathlon at Wallace Marine Park, where I helped wobbly swimmers come out and get to their bikes. This is a busy month for our family. There's 7 birthdays, 4 wedding anniversaries, and we actually married off my oldest stepdaughter. We did go to Vegas to celebrate our anniversary, and the highlights of that, we went to Hell's Kitchen and met with Michelle, the winner. She came to our table. We had pictures, and her favorite on the menu is salmon, and we're thinking of how we can send her a fresh one. And then walking through MGM, we happened to see Pete Rose signing autographs, so we got a signature on a ball and spent about 15 minutes talking to him about players, including Joe DiMaggio, and that was a very cool experience. So that was, oh, and I missed the ribbon cutting because my winemaker called and said that they were picking the grapes that day, and I had to be there if I wanted any of them, so I was literally up to my elbows in grapes about the time that you were cutting ribbon.
Thank you. Director Lincoln?
Well, in addition to the board meeting and the work session, I had a Kaiser Transportation Safety Bike PED Committee meeting, and we are still working on a couple of applications for the Safe Routes to School program, which I'm hoping at least one of them will get some money to build some sidewalks around elementary schools in Kaiser. Went from there to the West Kaiser Neighborhood Association meeting, and I also attended the Salem City Club and heard the legislative overview for the next session, upcoming session. Attended 2 SCATS meetings since our last board meeting. The only couple of things that are of interest to transit folks is the SCATS committee approved a resolution for to amend the transportation improvement program to add the grant and local matching money for 3 new compressed natural gas buses for Cherriots. So that was good news. You know, if we don't get them one place, we try to get them another place. So we've got money for 3 new buses coming in eventually. We also discussed at the SCATS meeting the OMPOC legislative agenda. OMPOC is going to be hopefully somewhat active in the legislature, and the group decided that transit and safe routes to school and universal access for everyone and more money for sidewalks were some of our top priorities. So that was good to hear. That benefits sidewalks, benefit transit users also. I also want to, well, yeah, it's campaign season coming up, so attended several house meetings, house parties, and I'll be canvassing most Saturdays between now and voting day. And I also want to put out a plug for the Drive Less Challenge, which starts October 1st. And this is a effort to get people out of their cars and onto their bikes or walking or sharing rides to get to work or to do their commute to save as much, save the health, improve their health and save the environment. So if you're interested in seeing what you can do, there's prizes available for people who sign up, and a lot of people join teams and try to get, their team saves more miles than the group next in the office next to them. So go to drivelessconnect.com and you can sign up and see what all the activities are and how you can join with this. It's a great way to see what your other options are for commuting to work. And the last thing is the next OMPOC meeting is October 26th in Bend, and I'm going to try to head over there early on Friday morning. So that's it.
Thank you. Director Kelly.
Just an interesting sidelight that Director Krebs brought the picture of the train station 100-year anniversary. And Cherriots was actually the organization that put ourselves forward to try to save the train station to begin with. We couldn't implement it, but we actually put forth the application for some federal funds for historic designations for transportation. And so Cherriots has a little bit there to do with the success and the nice look that the train station has. ODOT has lots more power and resources, so we turned it over, but it was basically saving the train station first. So I went to the work session, the board meeting, went to City Club. I missed the ribbon cutting ceremony, and we had a Area Commission on Transportation meeting. We started out with quite a discussion on small cities and their ability to apply for projects, and I will probably have more discussions about that, but one of the things that happened in House Bill 2017 was there were some provisions for smaller cities to have a bigger pot of money to do some work from, not just the gas tax. So, and then we had a presentation on roundabouts. Now, everybody on the Area Commission on Transportation is not exactly thrilled with roundabouts, but I like them. There's one up in Lake Oswego on Stafford Road that I use every month for 3 years, and I still occasionally use it. And once you learn how to do it, they really are nice. And people can try by going out to Kaiser. Kathy Clark was real excited about the roundabout because they do have one on Chamawa and Verda and Chamawa.
By the cow park.
What?
By the cow park. They still have cows out there
And
in the
so-
middle of Kaiser.
Not much longer.
The house is gone. I think that somebody that is either associated with the board or the budget committee or something was one of the first people on a bicycle through it. So we talked about project scoping, and then the other big agenda item was a presentation on ODOT's strategic plan and how they're, over the next 5 years, and how they're going to be able to try to streamline things and get all the work done that they have to do for House Bill 2017, because not only was the bill very good for transit, but it's the biggest funding for transportation bill that's ever passed in the state of Oregon, and so will be lots of work for ODOT. We heard about the update on the portion of I-5 that's south of Salem. They've got an application in to add some truck climbing lanes just south, so that it might help on some of the congestion. And then we talked a little bit about the area commission's chair going to the Oregon Transportation Commission's workshop in October. The commission does sort of a retreat planning session in October, and they invite the area commission chairs to join them for part of that time. I just got a notice that the area commission meeting will be canceled for October, so I have a free afternoon next week. And General Manager Pollock mentioned that Julie Brown was appointed to the Transportation Commission, not the just previous, but the previous member from the southern part of the state was David Lohman, and he was general manager for Rogue Valley Transportation, so he was actually a pretty good advocate for transit as well, because he understood those things. And I missed the ribbon cutting because we were in Las Cruces, New Mexico for a memorial for Victor's uncle. Well attended, lots of family, probably only about 50 or 60 family there, could have been more. But our bed and breakfast was next to the Roadrunner, which is the name of their bus system, was 2 doors down from the transit center for the Las Cruces bus system. And our hostess, because we stayed at a bed and breakfast, said that when they were planning on putting the transit center there, she was a little bit worried, and her next door neighbor was worried about the noise and all of those other things. Nothing like that has come to pass, and so they're happy that they have it there. And so I think that's about all that I've done.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else that we need to discuss this evening? If not, the meeting is adjourned.